Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. We finished off last night talking about Bradley Edwards, one of the lawyers for the Jeffrey Epstein survivors. And Bradley Edwards has a book coming out on March 31st called Relentless Pursuit that I certainly recommend everybody goes out and purchases. I think that it's going to add a lot of context to what we already know, and I think it's going to be an important addition to the catalog as we move forward. So last night we heard from Bradley Edwards, and he was talking about Virginia Roberts and his experience representing her and what it was like when she first brought the accusations to him. And it was a disturbing read. I'm not gonna make pretend that it wasn't. It was a disturbing read. It was it's always hard for me to read articles like that and not be enraged and want to go on a spree of punching people in the face like Jeffrey Epstein, because certainly if anyone ever deserved a punch in the face, it's Jeffrey Epstein. But it makes me sad, all kidding aside, all nonsense aside. It makes me sad to read stuff like that and to see what people like Virginia or Maria Farmer or Annie Farmer had to go through, and what the burden that they've carried along with them since their abuse at the hands of Epstein and his cohorts. And, when we hear from a guy like Bradley Edwards, who is a lawyer, right? He's always, I'm sure a guy like Bradley Edwards is skeptical of everything. And I'm sure he does very good work to vet claims such as these, right? So when Virginia Roberts first went to him, I'm sure Bradley Edwards wasn't, locked in and totally on board and believing everything she said. But as Virginia provided receipts and proof and pictures, well, the picture started to change, not only for Bradley Edwards, but for everybody who had access to this evidence. And we see that in the public as well. I know people who, when I first started talking about this case with them, people were very skeptical. These girls are looking to get some money, blah, 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 blah. But the more people learn about the case and the more people understand the damning evidence that has been brought forward in this case, well, the quicker they are to start believing that, well, there was something severely wrong here. And I think that's most of the general public who don't know what was going on in this case, who don't know all of the nuances of the case. They don't understand the big picture in the case. I think a lot of people have been misled by the media to believe that this was just, a man who maybe was a little bit of a pervert or something like that. They don't understand the full scope, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. The media has never even delved into the full scope of what Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were up to. And that's why it's important when we hear from people like Bradley Edwards, because that's a first-hand account, right? That's somebody that was on the ground, in the trenches, fighting against people like Dershowitz, fighting against the evil team of lawyers that Epstein put together. This is a man, Bradley Edwards, who definitely knows what's what. So like I said last night, when he speaks, he's definitely somebody that we should be listening to, somebody that we should take to heart when he talks about what's going on in this case. It's definitely the time to listen. So with that said, we're going to jump into the second article he penned for the Daily Mail. And the headline is "The Epstein Cover-Up. Devastating book exposes how the U.S. government hid the appalling scale of child abuse by Prince Andrew's friend and piles pressure on Duke to reveal what he knows." Author Mark Hookham for the Mail on Sunday. Prince Andrew is set to come under renewed pressure to tell the FBI what he knows about Jeffrey Epstein, as an explosive new book reveals how the U.S. government covered up the billionaire pedophile's appalling crimes and protected his powerful friends. What have we been saying on the podcast from the very beginning, folks? What have we been telling you on this podcast from the very beginning? Now go back and look at what the mainstream legacy media has been telling you about this case. Look at what they've been telling you about everything. Aren't you tired of them gaslighting you? Aren't you tired of them lying to you? Aren't you tired of them covering up for people like Jeffrey Epstein? Well, if that's the case, then I hope that there's a mass exodus away from the legacy media and their lies in the wake of this. And I'm not saying you should all come here to this podcast to get your information, right? I'd gladly have you along for the ride. But what I am saying is the legacy media is full of liars, deceitful scoundrels who do not care about you or the victims. The government hid all of this stuff, made sure Epstein was able to do what he wanted to do, and then the media covered all of that up. Because, as we know, they have their disgusting relationship, their symbiotic, parasitical relationship with the intelligence community. And they work hand in hand all the time. We saw it throughout the whole entire Russia investigation. Go back and investigate it, folks. I know that doesn't fit into a lot of people's confirmation bias, and I know that a lot of you don't want to believe the fact that the government is lying to you about things as important as the situation in Russia, but they are. You cannot trust the intelligence agencies in this country. And it has nothing to do with Trump or politics or anything like that. I'd be saying the same thing no matter who the president was at this point. Because we have an out-of-control intelligence apparatus, not only in America, but around the world. And it needs to be reined in. And we see it in every aspect of our life, pretty much. We see their fingerprints everywhere. And the fact that they were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, the fact that they were involved with Ghislaine Maxwell, the fact that they were involved with Jean-Luc Brunel, the fact that they were involved with the Core 4, and the fact that they provided cover for them should never, ever be forgotten, folks, okay? Just remember, who shot you straight as far as media goes, independent content creators, independent journalists, whatever, and the legacy media, remember who shot you straight and who served you up bullshit. The astonishing account serialized in the Mail on Sunday details how prosecutors conspired with the tycoon's lawyers to hide the industrial scale of his child sex abuse. Of course they did. Of course they did. You think all of these lawyers that were involved in prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein weren't scared of the people sitting across from them? Dershowitz and company? These are high-profile lawyers, folks, with really, really, really high connections. And if you don't think the prosecutors understood that, we heard from Acosta. We heard from Acosta saying that Epstein belongs to intelligence. He was told hands off. What more do you need? Okay? Of course he's not going to come out and say that now because the CIA probably planted a bomb in his car or some sort of inserted bomb in his underneath his skin, and if he talks, they'll blow him up. Obviously, I'm just kidding about that, but really, people are scared of the intelligence services. You heard what Chuck Schumer said when Trump was first elected. Oh, the intelligence agencies, they'll find a way to wreck you from 3 ways to Sunday, or whatever nonsense he was talking about. But the essence of his message was truthful. You don't want to be on the wrong side of the intelligence agencies. You don't want to be on the wrong side of these people. They'll take control of your car, and next thing you know, you'll be crashed into a tree. And these are the people that were providing protection for Jeffrey Epstein, because we all know all that matters is the means to the end. Everything is justified. Doesn't matter what it is. Mass murder, genocide, war, child sex trafficking rings. As long as there's a means to the end for these sick, disturbed, corrupt people in intelligence, they will continue on with whatever plot they hatch. And it doesn't matter what effect it has on the rest of us. The news has prompted some survivors to once again demand that the Duke cooperates with investigators probing Epstein's trafficking network. Andrew, who has been accused of sleeping with one of Epstein's former sex slaves, you know what? I hate using that word, sex slave. That's ridiculous. One of Epstein's survivors has so far refused to do so. The cover-up, exposed in forensic detail for the first time by Bradley Edwards, a lawyer for more than 20 of the victims, means that the billionaire's wealthy and influential friends, including Andrew, have so far avoided scrutiny. And that's why I'm here, folks. Okay? I've told you that from the very beginning. When I first started this podcast, it had nothing to do with anything besides the corruption in the government. I was so bent out of shape by how corrupt the government was and by what I was hearing from my sources about how Epstein got off and how he was protected made me so aggravated that I had to start this podcast. And on the journey, as I've learned more, it has become a whole, now it's, I'd say it's about the corruption still, obviously, because that's something that bothers me, because I've seen the way that the powers of the state have been wielded against people that I love for crimes much less than Jeffrey Epstein's. And it motivated me to speak out. But as I've gotten to know the survivors, some of the survivors personally of Jeffrey Epstein, and as I've read stories of others, it has forced me almost into the position of standing up and becoming a voice for these girls. That was never my intention. I'm not some kind of advocate for anybody, really. That's not who I am. That's not how I roll. I'm somebody who speaks out when he sees wrong, though. And whenever I see something that's wrong and I feel like I can add to that, I'm going to speak out against it. And that was the beginning of this podcast. That's why I started it, because of the government corruption angle. But now, as I've read more and my whole entire outlook has evolved on stuff like this, and obviously the most important thing in this case for me at this point is the justice for these girls, because that's what really matters. And if these girls end up getting the justice that they deserve, the justice that we're all seeking and pushing for, then in turn, that's going to bring to light the corruption inside of our government, inside of the CIA, inside of the Mossad, inside of whichever ABC intelligence group you want to add here. Because this has become a literal punch fight for me at this point. This is 167 straight days now with a podcast that has to do with this topic. And the more I read, the more agitated I get. The more information I receive from sources, the more agitated I get. And the more I talk to survivors in a personal setting, the more motivated I am to keep going. And then we hear from a guy like Bradley Edwards, who confirms everything we've been talking about on this podcast, folks, about this being an intelligence operation, about Epstein being an asset, about Maxwell being an asset. We all knew. Every one of us here on this podcast either had a few ideas that this was the case or had the gut feeling that it was. And here we are now, months into it, and we're starting to hear from people, firsthand accounts from people who were inside sources, people who were inside battling against this cabal, coming out and confirming everything that we've been saying. And I know we were on the right track, and I know we've been talking about the correct stuff here on this podcast and plenty of other podcasts, by the way. Again, I'm not saying just me. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just one little simple piece of this puzzle. All of us are playing our part. Everybody's playing their part in this. I have nothing but love for every single independent content creator that talks about this topic. You'll never hear me say anything bad about any of those people, because we're all in this together, right? Everybody's in this battle together, and everybody has had enough. And when we hear from a guy like Bradley Edwards, who confirms that we're on the right path, what that should do is motivate you to dig your teeth in deeper, grab a better hold, and guess what? Now it's time for us to start shaking our heads, our collective heads, just like a pit bull would. Because we're on the right trail here, folks. The breadcrumbs are leading us to the promised land. And once we get there, I'm telling you right now, the arrests are going to occur. Crucially, the book also discloses how socialite co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell was a pivotal figure in Epstein's sex cult for more than a decade, allegedly helping him recruit and groom underage girls. We know that. We definitely know that. We've talked about that at length. Ghislaine Maxwell was the brains behind the operation, and until you provide me with evidence that is contrary to that, there's nobody that's going to change my mind about it. I've spent countless hours, folks, as you all know, digging into this case, going to different states, going to Santa Fe, talking to sources, digging in the internet, talking to people on the internet via direct message, etc., etc. And there is nobody on God's green earth that is going to convince me that Ghislaine Maxwell did not have a leadership role in Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise. Edwards' account of Maxwell's alleged involvement raises serious questions about why she has never faced justice. The 58-year-old's whereabouts remain a mystery. The book also claims that the pedophile Epstein had links to the CIA. Guys, look, I've told you this from the very beginning, and there's other folks who have said the same thing. You know, there are a lot of people who have been following this case from the very beginning who are locked in. You know, you got Whitney Webb, definitely somebody who's locked into the case, definitely somebody who has had her finger on the pulse. Do I agree with all of her assertions? Of course not, but that's okay. I respect her opinion and I respect her work. You have Sean Atwood, who's doing great work over on YouTube. Another person who, you know, he delves into some things, some areas where I don't dip my toes, but again, another person whose work I respect. And you don't even need to get me started with my main girls from Australia, right? We all know that the ladies from Australia are doing a great job on a regular basis, coming out, letting people know the deal, educating the folks down under, right? The Prince and the Perv podcast is fantastic. So, you know, all of these independent content creators that have been delving deep into this story, every one of us has seen the same signs, has followed the same clues, has followed the same breadcrumbs, and we all know that this is an intelligence operation. We all understand that this was a blackmail operation, a honeypot, a honey trap, whatever you want to call it, and we all know that the most important currency to these people, we know it's not money, they have that in abundance. The most important currency to these people is information. Now, if they have information on you and they can keep you under their thumb, that means that they own you. Whatever they say you need to do, you need to do. They say jump, you jump. If you're a scientist and you're working on a project and they want information on that project, you're going to give it to them. Do you know why? Because if not, you're going to be exposed as somebody who sleeps with children. Talk about the perfect blackmail operation. Jeffrey Epstein appeared to have links with the CIA, according to claims by his former bodyguard in the Bombshell new book. The Minder said he was sent to the spy agency's HQ in Virginia to attend classes for a week, where he was introduced as a special operative. Isn't this all nice, huh? Isn't this all fantastic? You know, anyone who didn't believe that Jeffrey Epstein was a CIA asset or a Mossad CIA asset up until this point, well, here's all the evidence that you need. All right, you can continue to believe that Epstein was operating on his own if you'd like, and that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you about it, but the evidence certainly doesn't lead there. The evidence certainly leads to this being such a wide-spread operation that spanned continents. The evidence is abundant for that. His other 44 classmates were from the CIA or some other government unit with top-secret clearance. Afterward, the bodyguard, a Russian mixed martial arts fighter, was told to deliver a book with a personalized note to Jeffrey. The disclosure will fuel speculation that Epstein may have secured a shockingly lenient plea deal in 2007 because of alleged links to intelligence agencies. Yeah, no shit. Of course he did. Acosta already told us that. But what this does is it adds context, right? It adds more meat to the bone. Again, it shows you're on the right path, folks. And you are. All of you who have found your way to this podcast, you might have come here for different reasons or your motivations might have been different. But once you've come and you've locked yourself in and you've gotten, set in this case, I don't see how you can come up with any other scenario that doesn't include the CIA or the Mossad or intelligence in this case. And if you have another scenario where it doesn't include the intelligence apparatus, I would love to hear it. And I'm not saying that as a clown either, as somebody who's, I'd love to hear that, being, no, I would truly love to hear it. I want to hear everybody's opinions about this. I want to hear everybody's theories about all of this, because guess what? My opinion is always ready to be changed. My opinion goes where the evidence leads me. So if somebody out there has a convincing argument leading away from the intelligence angle, please share that with us. We all want to hear it. The book also claims that there were whispers as far back as the 1980s that the financier, pedophile, was associated with the CIA, Mossad, or another intelligence agency. Of course he was. He was associated with Bob Maxwell, right? We all know who Bob Maxwell was. He's associated with Les Wexner, right? Well, we all know about the mega group, and we all know that Les Wexner is a big part of that. So of course he had ties to intelligence. The bodyguard told Bradley Edwards that he was hired because Epstein feared some girl's dad would try to kill him. But the real-life tough guy also made clear that he was frightened by his boss. Despite identifying 40 female victims, the U.S. government secretly struck a deal in 2007 not to prosecute Epstein for sexually abusing underage girls at his Florida home. The book reveals how FBI agents had compiled a mountain of evidence against Epstein, which would have seen him jailed for life. But instead, he was allowed to plead guilty to lesser charges of soliciting for prostitution and procuring a minor for prostitution, and was sentenced to 18 months in jail, although he only served 13. And again, I know I have to say it every single time, but a minor cannot be a prostitute, okay? A minor who is being trafficked or forced into sexual relations with a man is being raped and abused, okay? Don't say prostitute. Don't put a stigma on them. That's not going to fly. I'm not going to let that fly. We're not going to talk like that here on this podcast anyway. There is zero chance that we're going to call little girls prostitutes ever on this podcast. Incredibly, the book reveals Epstein was allowed to spend much of that time working at his Florida office, where he continued to arrange for women to be flown to him for sex. We heard this from Denise George as well. We heard that he was down in St. Thomas diddling young girls while he was out on house arrest. Great job, state of Florida. You sure do a fantastic job holding your criminals down, locking them down. Great job. The book, entitled Relentless Pursuit, also details how survivors were kept in the dark about the plea deal and were led to believe that police were still investigating Epstein's crimes. It's a travesty. It is an absolute travesty. That alone should have this whole entire plea deal thrown out. Furthermore, Epstein should have been tried even in death. Okay? Remember the movie Weekend at Bernie's? Prop this son of a bitch up in a seat. Embalm him, whatever you have to do, but prop this bastard up in the seat and let's go on with the trial. Okay, this is just another loophole that you scumbag, intelligent scumbaggers use. Oh, he's dead, so the case is over. Oh, how did he die? Oh, he killed himself. Can we see some evidence of that maybe? You guys got something to show us to prove you're not lying again? Nah, just take our word for it, just like in Iraq. There were weapons of mass destruction there, all right? Take our word for it. 9/11? There's Saudi involvement. Come on. Meanwhile, 27 redacted pages later, we find out all of the Saudi involvement. Should I keep going? The Gulf of Tonkin, Ruby Ridge, Waco, you name it, okay? The deceitful ass intelligence apparatus in this country cannot be trusted. It must be scattered to the four winds, just like JFK wanted to do. The deal met the grotesque scale of his offending, and explosive claims that girls were forced to have sex with his powerful friends were only revealed years later. And again, that's what they like to do. They drag their feet. Let's let the information come out slowly over the years when people have lost interest in the Jeffrey Epstein case. That'll be a great way to make sure we bury this. That was their plan. Guess what? You know what they say about the best laid plans, right? That's right, we're here to disrupt shit. I'm like John McClane, just a fly in the ointment, Hans. And that's what I plan on doing, acting like the John McClane of this podcasting shit. All right? The Jeffrey Epstein case is the Nakatomi Tower, and I am inside of that Nakatomi Tower right now, tearing it apart piece by piece from the inside, folks. Now I got a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. Large sections of the book focus on Miss Roberts, who spent 3 years as Epstein's abuse victim. She claims she was forced to have sex with Andrew on 3 occasions. 4 years ago, at the height of his investigation into Epstein, Edwards took a formal statement about Miss Roberts' allegations from Alan Dershowitz, the tycoon's high-profile lawyer. Oh, Mr. Dershowitz, I like to keep my underwear on, so I'm not guilty, but I'm still getting touched by young girls. You're a sick dude, Alan Dershowitz. Hate to tell you, my opinion of you is that you're a very sick man, a very, very sick man, okay? And other people might be afraid of you, but I am certainly not, sir, okay? I am not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of your buddies. I'm not afraid of the Mossad people that you hire to follow people around. That ain't my skis, homie. You have people following me around, I'll be stopping in the middle of the road, walking over to their car, and asking what the deal is. I'm from the east side of Las Vegas. We don't talk and play games. I will extract you from that vehicle, Mr. Mossad CIA security guy, and teach you a lesson. All right? I'm not intimidated by none of these people. Ever. The fact of the matter is, with Alan Dershowitz, though, that's his MO. He loves to try and intimidate. He loves to bring lawsuits against people. Well, Mr. Dershowitz, the party's over for you too, sir. You will not escape being raked over the coals on this podcast. There's two stories in this case, your side and Virginia's. I believe Virginia 100%, and I do not believe you at all, Mr. Dershowitz, all right? So put that in your pipe and smoke it. Edwards claims that Mr. Dershowitz refused to deny the specific claim that Miss Roberts had been paid to have sex with the prince and instead attacked her character, saying if she was paid $15,000 to have sex with Prince Andrew at the age of 17 in England, she would be guilty of prostitution. This is the kind of man we're talking about, and this is why Dershowitz will get no quarter on this podcast, ever. The man is disgusting. He's a vile individual. And this is his MO when it comes to survivors of Epstein and otherwise, to flip the script on them and to go after their character and to call them prostitutes and to mean them and to call them whatever name, insert name here. Well, Mr. Dershowitz, those days are over. You're not going to get away with that anymore. You're not going to be able to just fling shit out at people anymore without anybody stepping up to the plate and calling you out. Because I'm right here, 7 days a week. And like I said a second ago, you do not intimidate me, sir. Edwards adds in his book, I didn't let him off the hook. My question is, was she lying when she says she was paid to have sex with Prince Andrew? Trapped with nowhere to go, he responded, I have no idea. Yo, look, nobody's saying that Dershowitz isn't shrewd in the courtroom. Nobody's saying that Dershowitz doesn't know how to answer an interrogation. He does. The guy's a great lawyer. I mean, there's no taking that away from him. A fantastic lawyer. No doubt about it. But that doesn't make him a good human being. In my opinion, he's a shitty-ass human being. Mr. Dershowitz last night said he had never seen the Duke act inappropriately and that he does not believe Miss Roberts' accusations against Andrew. He added, Edwards mischaracterized my testimony. I hope you will report that he distorted it. I have learned since then that nothing she says should be credited, talking about Virginia. And it's always, Edwards mischaracterized my testimony. And then he tries to sue the other lawyers as well, like we've seen with David Boies. He's a scoundrel. Alan Dershowitz is a scoundrel, and Trump should be embarrassed. If Trump had any humility, he would be embarrassed about Dershowitz, but we know that Trump doesn't have any humility, folks, so embarrassment certainly isn't going to come into the equation. The book raises fresh questions about Andrew's controversial stay at Epstein's New York mansion in December 2010. The news that he had visited Epstein, by then a convicted sex offender, has plagued the Queen's second son ever since. Last year, the Mail on Sunday revealed astonishing video footage of the Duke peering from the mansion's grand front door and waving to a pretty brunette during his stay of at least 6 days. In May 2016, according to the book, Jean-Luc Brunel, who ran a model agency and has been accused of procuring girls for Epstein, told Edwards that Epstein's new chief recruiter was a Russian-born 20-something-year-old woman. Well, isn't that nice? Jean-Luc Brunel talking out of the side of his mouth, huh? The unfindable, where's Waldo, Jean-Luc Brunel, talking about how Epstein's new chief recruiter was a Russian-born 20-something-year-old woman, huh? I wonder who that might be. According to Brunel, she was using her connections to import young girls to the United States under the pretense that they were models, Edwards writes. So I find it a little hard to believe that it was this Russian girl who was doing that and not Brunel. Sorry, Brunel, we all know that he was the connect. He was the international pipeline guy. He was sending 12-year-old girls to Jeffrey Epstein. He had MC2. He had the building off of 66th Street where him and Epstein were keeping these girls. So, yeah, I think he's trying to throw a little blame on whoever this Russian girl is. And really, he was the one giving the orders, in my opinion, right? Brunel was directing her to do what she had to do, directing her on what girls Epstein would like, etc., etc. She is believed to have been pictured leaving Epstein's mansion during Andrew's stay in December 2010, and she was snapped outside the home again in 2016. Andrew has said that during the time he spent with Epstein, he did not witness any suspicious behavior, but the suggestion that he may have stayed at the mansion at the same time as a recruiter will further fuel demands for the Duke to cooperate with the FBI. Yeah, but he's not going to. His dream team of lawyers has already shut that shit down. And again, I'm not blaming them for that. That's what they should do. Good lawyers should make sure that their guilty clients aren't speaking to prosecutors, right? But at the end of the day, we all know that he's guilty. Don't try and reform his image. Don't try any of that shit because it won't work. We all know the score already. Earlier this month, U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman claimed the Duke had completely shut the door on the investigation. Well, Mr. Berman, you have the ability and the power of the federal government behind you. Why don't you kick that door in? Miss Roberts, now 36, claims she was coerced into having sex with Andrew at Maxwell's London home in March 2001. In 2016, Edwards quizzed Miss Roberts' ex-boyfriend, Tony Figueroa, who supported her allegation. Tony even remembered Virginia calling him when Ghislaine fixed her up with Prince Andrew in London and explaining over the phone how she did not want to have sex with him, but it was part of what she needed to do to continue their lifestyle, Edwards writes. Continue their lifestyle? So this guy, Tony Figueroa, was living off of Virginia Roberts being abused by Maxwell and Epstein? That's kind of shitty. The Duke has repeatedly and strenuously denied Miss Roberts' claims. Last November, he told Newsnight's Emily Maitlis in an interview, "I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever. Nobody believes you, Prince of Punk Asses, Prince of Lies." The book charts for the first time the scale of the alleged involvement of Ghislaine Maxwell, one of Andrew's closest friends, in Epstein's offending. Both Epstein and Maxwell were invited by the prince to Windsor Castle to help celebrate his daughter Beatrice's 18th birthday in 2006. Imagine that shit, huh? Epstein and Maxwell invited to the royal birthday party of one of the royals. But they weren't close, folks. They didn't have that close of a relationship, okay? And the prince is an honorable guy, so we should believe him. Incredibly, a year earlier, police in Florida discovered that Epstein was abusing 3 girls a day at his property in Palm Beach and had identified 23 underage victims. According to the book, Maxwell kept the name of the girls who were being abused by Epstein on her computer. Where is that computer? Is that the computer that Sarah Kellen Vickers walked out of off the property with? Could that be a computer hidden at the New Mexico ranch, which still has not been raided? These are questions that I have, but nobody has any answers for me. Edwards writes how Epstein had an unquenchable appetite for young girls and Ghislaine had a knack for finding them. The pair had started a relationship in the early 90s. Epstein's former housekeeper, Juan Alessi, told Edwards that Maxwell ordered staff at the Palm Beach mansion to treat the billionaire like royalty and never look him in the eye. As soon as Maxwell moved in, female masseuses began visiting who did not look professional and appeared too young, Mr. Alessi claimed. Well, no shit, that was part of the plan. Epstein was bringing them in, he had his own proclivities, and he had to sate his own disgusting tastes, right? But also, along with that, the intelligence apparatus found his proclivities useful. They could feed his disgusting urge for these young girls, and at the same time have him involved in their honey trap operation. So it worked out well for both of them. Epstein was benefiting by having just a constant line of young ladies brought to him for him to abuse, and he was also being, having funds made available and a place in a New York elite society open to him because of his proclivities and because of the fact that intelligence seen it as a win-win for them. As well as grooming Miss Roberts, Maxwell allegedly recruiting Epstein's earliest known victim in 1994, a 13-year-old talented singer who Edwards calls Kat. As part of their grooming process, Ghislaine and Jeffrey would talk about sex with her frequently, Edwards writes. By the time Kat was 14, Epstein was regularly molesting her, and Maxwell was continuing to remind her of all Epstein was doing for her career. When Kat was 17 years old, Jeffrey Epstein forcibly raped her, taking her virginity. I mean, really, folks, this is in 1994. This 13-year-old girl was being raped and abused by Jeffrey Epstein. His butler knew that all these girls looked too young, but all of these supposedly super smart, high society elites had no idea. We're supposed to believe that? We're supposed to believe that you're that ignorant, huh? Sorry. I'm not believing it. In fact, I'll take it a step further. All of these enablers, every single one of them, folks, listen to me clearly. Every one of them, including Donald Trump, including Bill Clinton, they're all complicit as enabling Jeffrey Epstein, okay? Another victim, Maria Farmer, who claims she was groped by Epstein and Maxwell in 1996, told the author how sometimes she would be riding in Ghislaine's chauffeured car when Ghislaine saw a girl, stopped the car, got out, and lured her to Jeffrey. We know that's a fact. We know that they loved Central Park, too. We know that. Okay? Edwards adds, other times, when Maria and Ghislaine would walk through Central Park, Ghislaine would approach a girl minding her business on a park bench and within minutes convince her to give up her phone number. And what Ghislaine Maxwell would call these girls is nubile. That is what she would refer to them as. Okay? Nubiles. Think about that for a minute, folks. Think about how chilling that is. It is claimed that after Maria complained to the FBI about being assaulted, she was telephoned by Maxwell, who allegedly warned, if you report us to the police again, I will have you killed. I can confirm that. I've spoken with Maria at length at this point. Maria and I are in contact. She is a very strong woman, and I have a ton of respect for Maria and Annie Farmer and for what they went through and for the courage that they've shown through in the face of all of this cannot be understated. They are such powerful, strong women, and they are definitely the type of people that you need to take down people like Jeffrey Epstein. They're right there with Virginia and Courtney and the rest of the gals who have come forward and standing shoulder to shoulder, and they're all leaning on each other for support throughout this. And what they're doing is they're setting an example for women or boys or anyone who is affected by people like Epstein in the future to come forward and to know that what they say is going to be taken seriously. And I just can't commend all of them enough for their courage. And for Maria, who I really respect a whole lot, folks. I really respect the person that she is, the human that she is, and I respect what she has been able to survive. And for her not to be listened to all them decades ago, it breaks my heart, because if they would have simply listened to Maria and they would have listened to Annie, none of this would have happened. Last week it emerged that Maxwell is seeking cash from Epstein's £550 million estate to pay off her legal fees, a move that prompted anger from the survivors. Yeah, and from all of us. That shit's not going to fly. Edwards last night demanded that Prince Andrew agree to be interviewed as part of legal action that 5 of his clients are taking against Epstein's vast estate. Meanwhile, Gloria Allred, a U.S. lawyer representing several other victims, said, Unless he agrees to speak to the FBI and provides truthful answers to their questions, the victims and law enforcement will continue to pursue him. I can assure him that no amount of legal armor or palace guards will shield him from his attempts to thwart justice and the truth. A spokeswoman for the Duke of York declined to comment. Of course they did. They don't have nothing to say at this point. Refer everything to his lawyers is the best we're going to get, and then we contact his lawyers and we get nothing there either. They shut their yaps and they don't say much about anything. So that's where we're at, folks. We have, the information coming out by Bradley Edwards is very important. It adds a lot of context to what we've known already, and it also lets us know that we are definitely on the right track. We are moving in the right direction to get to the point where we truly have as many of the facts as we possibly can have in this case. Now, obviously, it's important that the court documents are released, that we have some of these dumps and we get to see some of the stuff that's been hidden by their friends in the court system and their friends in intelligence. That all needs to come to light. Especially in light of all of this information coming out, I don't know how Judge Preska cannot release all of this. And I believe that the pressure needs to be put on the government to be more transparent. And we need to make sure that we're getting all of the information that the public should be getting in this case. Because the more that they hide, the more that they obfuscate, the more we believe that we're being lied to, and the more we believe that the government does not give a good goddamn about these survivors or about the rule of law. And unfortunately, folks, that's the way it looks. Berman says that Andrew has closed the door to cooperating. He has the power to kick that door right in, but he hasn't done it for some reason. So we're going to keep monitoring this. We're going to keep going with this story, obviously. And later on, we're going to read another article from the Daily Mail where Mr. Edwards talks about Donald Trump and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. So that'll be later on tonight. That'll be our daily drop, at least one of the stories on the daily drop tonight. And of course, I am premiering the new coronavirus COVID-19 podcast today as well. That will be out at about 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you'll be able to find that the same place that you find the Jeffrey Epstein podcast, right there at our inside of our right there where you find the Jeffrey Epstein podcast on Spreaker. You go and just click on the shows link and it will bring you to the new podcast. So I'm still tossing around a name for it, so I haven't named it yet, but it will be out tonight at 8 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we will go over the whole entire situation, right? We're going to do it the same format that we do here. It will be, we'll read some articles. We'll get into my opinion on some of those articles. We'll get into an overview of the situation. And then what we'll do is we'll also go through the daily counts and we'll talk a little bit about exponential growth and why that is so important when it comes to viral outbreaks such as this. And we're going to also discuss how a lot of governments and how especially the legacy media didn't take this serious for way too long. And with them not taking this serious, it has caused even more disruption in our lives and within society. So we're going to get into all of that tonight on the new podcast. So be on the lookout for that. You'll be able to find it. I'll leave a link in the description box here, a link for all the other shows on our platform, and you'll be able to find it in that link, and it'll be listed tonight right around 8 p.m. So if you're interested in hearing about that and hearing my opinions about COVID-19, Wuhan SARS, then that's definitely going to be the place for you. Again, we're gonna go with the no bullshit approach, right? We're gonna go with the same approach that I have here on the Jeffrey Epstein show, and we're not gonna leave stones unturned. We're not gonna shy away from delving into topics that some people might find uncomfortable because it's important. It's important to understand what truly went on from the very beginning and how we got to the point where we are at today. And it's important to understand the root. It's important to understand where it came from. It's important to understand how it was able to get so out of control. And the media is not doing a good enough job with that. The legacy media, what they're doing now is they're pushing their scare tactics, they're pushing their panic, they're pushing their pandemonium, whereas they could have informed everybody weeks ago, month ago, and people could have wrapped their head around it. But instead, they went the route of, oh no, it's only the flu, bro. It's just a cold, bro. And you see where that got us. So it's all about the right information, even if those facts and that information makes you feel uncomfortable and it's something that you don't want to accept. Unfortunately, when it comes to something like an outbreak of a disease like this, there's no time for half-stepping. There's no time for, political correctness. There's no time for any of that. There's only time for action. There's only time for action and actionable situations where lives are being saved and steps are being taken to mitigate the effects of such an outbreak. So we're going to get into all of that tonight. We're going to talk about all of it. If there are any topics that you would like to discuss in regards to the COVID-19 outbreak, feel free to email me at the same email address that you email me for here at the Jeffrey Epstein Show, and we'll get into all of it. And I'll try and answer any questions that you have to the best of my ability. And if I don't have those answers, which I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions that I don't have the answers for, we'll try and figure it out together. And we'll try and bring a little bit of balance to this whole entire debate, a little bit of normalcy, a little bit of truth, a little bit of no bullshit digging. All right, everybody, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, folks, I will be back later on the Jeffrey Epstein Show with a daily drop. And of course, like I said, the premiere of the new coronavirus podcast will also occur today. So until then, I hope you all have a fantastic Sunday, and I will talk to you all later on today.